Junior, when we get home, remind me to punch your mama in the mouth. Smokey and the Bandit. Buford T. Justice. Got an article from Terrence P. Jeffrey. CNSnews.com. This is more hard data. Things are not what they seem. The economy is not what the government and the media tells you, or the Federal Reserve, or the Treasurer, anybody. We are heading back into, it's already started by the way, recession 2.0, to be superior in a bad way compared to recession 1.0 back in 2008-9. Why? Because all that was there has now been compounded. All the debt compounded. Massive more debt to the, not just us and the country itself, as in people, credit cards, and that stuff, because that's what I'm talking about. But in addition, the country, $10 trillion more, etc. And now Trump's ready to spend trillions. And if a war breaks out, oh my goodness. Census. More Americans 18 to 34 now live with parents than with spouse. That's a good age. Isn't that the fighting age? Well, they may be out of your basement before you know it. There's going to be a job opening if North Korea does something here in the next few days, and they very well might. If I had to gamble, out of all the times I heard stuff in my lifetime about North Korea, right now would be the one time I'd be most concerned compared to all other times. Just want to say that. So if a war breaks out, there's going to be job openings for 18 to 34-year-olds left and right. We're going to hook you all up. 4 decades ago, in the mid-1970s, young American adults in the 18 to 34 age bracket were far more likely to be married and living with a spouse than living in their parents' home. But that is no longer the case, according to a new study by the U.S. Census Bureau. There are now more young people living with their parents than in any other arrangement, says the Census Bureau study. What is more, says the study, almost 9 out of 10 young people who were living in their parents' home a year ago are still living there today, making it the most stable living arrangement. I'd say the number one living arrangement today for Americans in the 18 to 34 age bracket, according to the Census Bureau, is to reside without a spouse in their parents' home. Not married, no nothing, just live with my parents. And these are the people who are going to have to pay your or my retirement, Social Security and whatnot, if you want to call it that, when we get older. They're either A, not working at all, which is why they're living there, or B, their job is so horrible, fast food, minimum wage, $10, $12, $15 an hour, not 30, 40, 50 they thought they'd get paid out of college and get this great job. And they got the massive student loan debt, so all the money they're earning at McDonald's or fast food, most of it's going there. And, again, the earlier, younger ones, under 25 years old, the car insurance, brutal. You need a full-time job just to pay that at that age, practically. So car insurance and this fee, that fee, pay my loan back fee, $1.4 trillion in debt, roughly, student loans. Boy, they're in a hurry to pay that off. That is where you can find now 22.9 million 18 to 34-year-olds compared to the 19.9 million who are married and live with their spouse. In 1975, according to the Census Bureau data, 31.9 million Americans in the 18 to 34 age bracket were married and live with their spouse. So that was almost 32 million. Now it's 22. It dropped a third. Back then, this was the most common living arrangement for that age bracket. Also in 1975, 14.7 million in the 18 to 34 age bracket lived in their parents' home. 6.1 million lived in an other arrangement, including with siblings, grandparents, other relatives, or unrelated roommates. 3.1 million lived alone, and 0.7 million cohabitated with an unmarried partner. I guess that's like a roommate kind of a thing. In 2016, hold on. All right, 2016, according to the Census Bureau, only 19.9 million were married and live with a spouse, while 22.9 million lived in their parents' home. Also in 2016, 15.6 million lived in an other arrangement, 9.2 million cohabitated with an unmarried partner, and 5.9 million lived alone. The Census Bureau counted college students living in dormitories as living in their parents' home. That's interesting. Counts college students living in a dormitory. I guess because I'm paying for the dormitory, you're living there, and as soon as you're done with college, you're coming back home anyways. I can see that. By contrast, it counted someone as living with a spouse, even if they and their spouse still lived with a parent. So that's interesting. If you had a spouse, married, but living with yours or their parents, doesn't count. It says it counted someone as living with a spouse, even if they were and their spouse lived with a parent. Right. So follow me? You're married and you're living in your mom's house. That doesn't count. We don't count that as you living at home. We count that as you living essentially with your spouse elsewhere. Wow. The category of living with a spouse, the study said, included any young adult who lives with a spouse, regardless of whether anyone else is present in the household, like their parents or anyone else, or family. In 1979, when calculated as percentages according to the census numbers, 57% of 18 to 34-year-olds lived with a spouse, 26% lived in their parents' home, 11% lived in other arrangement, 5% lived alone, and 1% lived with an unmarried partner. In 2016, 31% lived in their parents' home, 27% lived with their spouse, 21% lived in the other arrangement, and 12% lived with an unmarried partner, and 8% lived alone. The rise in young adults living at home coincided with a decline in the economic status of young men. More young men are falling to the bottom of the income ladder, says the Census Bureau study. In 1975, only 25% of men aged 25 to 34 had incomes of less than $30,000 a year. By 2016, that share rose to 41% of young men. Incomes for both years are in 2015 dollars, by the way. There are now more young women than young men with a college degree, whereas in 1975, educational attainment among young men outpaced that of women. Well, here's the thing. So what if a woman makes more? Good. You could still be married and moved out, and you find your woman and you move out. That shouldn't change anything. Whether you're the breadwinner or she's the breadwinner. The point is there's a ton more people staying at home with their parents. In the past decade, says the study, the pace of change in the living arrangements of young Americans has been rapid, but has not been uniform across the states and regions of the country. Within the last 10 years, the breadth and speed of change in living arrangements have been tremendous, it says. In 2005, the majority of young people lived independently in their own household, either alone, with a spouse, or an unmarried partner, which was the predominant living arrangement in 35 states. By 2015, just a decade later, only 6 states had a majority of young people living independently. Only 6 from 35. 6 states left. With the exceptions of California and Mississippi, the top 10 states with the highest percentages of 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents were concentrated along J-Snip Forest Coast. What the? They include New Jersey. That East Coast. What about Florida? Oh, yeah, I know Florida has to be in there. New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Maryland, Florida, Cali, as in California, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Mississippi. Mississippi. With the exceptions of Washington and Oregon, the 10 states with the lowest percentages of 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents were concentrated in the Midwest and mountain states. North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, Montana, Colorado, Kansas, Washington, as in Washington State, of course, and Oklahoma, which was tied with Oregon. Why are there geographical differences in young adult living arrangements? The census study asks. For one, the local labor, and housing markets shape the ability. I knew this. They were going to say this. I knew they were. I was about to stop and just start commenting, but I said, let me just finish the paragraph. Skyrocketing rental prices and mortgages. Where are they located? In major city centers. Plain and simple. Which is why I look out at Alabama and say, man, there is some seriously cheap living. Even right now with the housing prices so high everywhere. There's some freaking cheap living in Alabama. Well, J-State4 may have to ask, listen, can I be a telecommuter? You know, I'm not really doing much there on the floor anyways. I can program and do stuff remote. You know, I want to move to Alabama. So, of course, for one, local labor and housing markets shape the ability of young people to find good jobs in affordable housing, mostly affordable housing, which in turn affects whether and when they form their own households. So, is this good news or bad news? Are the numbers getting better or worse? In case you're wondering, everything I've been talking about, especially this year, and I've talked about probably everything I've ever talked about on YouTube, you know, from one video somewhere 3 or 4 years ago, something, I've talked about it a lot in 2017. I can't help it. It's just there. It's coming fast and furious. I have to discuss it because look, oh, new numbers, worse than this, worse than that, worse than the last time, worse than the worst time. That's the kind of stuff coming into me. Higher than that, worse off than that ever was, you know. This is not good. Not a good sign. I'm renting. I will continue to rent, and I want to see, because it's going to happen, the real estate market get absolutely decimated, destroyed. We need a market crash to come. It's going to. And then we need real estate to crash with it, because it has to anyways. Pick up the pieces, start over. Time for me to get a loan now. Oh, wait a minute. How cheap is it? Never mind. Sell some silver, Bitcoin. Let me buy that thing cash. I don't ever want to see one of you effing banks again. I will never step into what they're asking for a loan mortgage. Hey, can I interest you in a credit card, sir? We have it. I'm going to pull one from Happy Gilmore. You could interest me in a warm cup of shut the hell up. You're in my world now, Grandma. Read the name tag. Take care.